And I'm going to refer to an article or a website. I believe they're affiliated with Wikipedia, but the article kind of does a pretty good job summing this up. I've kind of embarrassed to say, but during my pre-Christian days, I've read several of these books by various ancient astronaut style authors and thinkers, people like Richard Hoagland, Zechariah Sitchin. I've watched some of their videos. Graham Hancock kind of fits into this crowd a little bit, especially with his book Fingerprints of the Gods. Good grief, man. That thing is a phone book. You could block bullets with it. But this article or website, bibliotechapleiades.net, and a whole bunch of forward slashes and dots and HTMLs, but or HTMs. But the website does a pretty nice job of summing things up. And so I'm going to kind of use that a little bit for a backbone of this study, although I'm going to be adding all kinds of extra stuff in. But really they do. They do a good job of tying in a bunch of different ancient astronaut theories, which is what the article is called, Ancient Astronaut Theories. So anyway, kind of jumping forward in this article, but some of the names, I already gave you some of the names, but some of the popular names in this movement are people like Charles Fort, Morris K. Jessup, George Hunt Williamson, Peter Colosimo, Henry Lote. Some of these names I'm not familiar with. Matist M. Argrist, Brinsley Poor, Raymond Drake, Brad Steiger. I've seen a lot of his stuff. I.S. Shlovsky, Carl Sagan. I know a lot of you guys are familiar with that guy with his billions and billions and billions TV show. I don't even know what the show is called now. I can't remember, but Carl Sagan and his evolution promoting TV show. Eric von Daniken. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Robert Shiro, Dr. S. Lunskaya, Rod Sterling, Robert K.G. Temple, Maurice Shatlin, Burke Eldman, and Alan Alford. And of course, the names I already mentioned, Zechariah Sitchin, Richard Hoagland, Graham Hancock, and of course, late night, coast to coast type shows like Art Bell was back in my day. Now they've got Robert Norrie. Now these guys, it's hard to pin them down on what they really believe on anything, but they certainly entertain the ancient astronaut thing on their shows quite a bit. So I'm going to lump them in there anyway. So we've already talked a little bit about what they believe as far as the ancient astronaut theory is basically the idea that aliens long ago or some other beings showed up on the planet and created life in one form or another, got things started. I guess I should have mentioned there are some that believe that the Earth was previously populated by a race of humans or something. Some people believe that actually humans lived on this Earth before. And somehow there was a cataclysmic event, perhaps a world flood or something like that, that wiped off everybody on the planet, and some managed to escape, like in spacecraft of some kind. They escaped out into space. The planet was destroyed and then repopulated at a later time. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, but there are some Christian groups that have somewhat of a spin-off of that idea, the ruin reconstruction theory, where Satan had a whole race of soulless men who lived on Earth. I know this is bizarre. I talk about it in one of my evolution series. I believe it was the Age of the Earth series that I did. And Satan apparently, this is according to them, had a soulless race of men. And there were animals, there was plant life. The whole planet was populated. And then it was destroyed. And then that's when the Bible picks up with the earth was without form and void. That whole tohu hobohu, the idea that they like to take this idea and say that the earth was reformed and refilled. So Satan had created this race, then God destroyed the entire planet, basically, everything on it, all life, and then recreated everything that we see. And so by doing this, they're able to add millions of years to the age of the earth. And this, the earth does, to some people, have the appearance of age. The geological layers and the starlight time problem. Like, how can we have stars that are billions of light years away and it takes billions of years for the light to get here? How can they be that far away and yet the universe is young? And so they have these issues. They use this ruin reconstruction theory to try and cover up those issues, but it actually causes all kinds of more problems. See my series on the age of the earth. But all that to say, there are Christians that like to use this ruin reconstruction theory, this idea that there were races on the planet, there were beings on the planet before Genesis 1:1, or rather 1:2, where God creates the earth out of something that is formless and void. Okay? Now, some of the adherents of the ancient astronaut theory like that idea or subscribe to the idea that the earth was populated once before and then totally destroyed. And they point to things like Atlantis, all the different towns, cities that are found underwater, in the ocean, in lakes, all over the place, all over the world. And you and me, we should be looking at that and saying, yeah, those are cities underwater. And that tells me something. There was a flood. Why would you build a city underwater? Well, I would argue that at one point that city was on dry land, and then there was a flood. And then the Bible says that the valleys sank down, and the mountains rose up, and the water kind of heaped together in one spot, the oceans, and also, formed great lakes all around the world, and there you have it. You have cities underwater, but nonetheless, they point at those cities as evidence. And so what other things do they point at as evidence? What leads people to believe this kind of stuff? Well, there's a lot of reasons. And honestly, guys, they really don't have any slam dunk proof. In fact, far, far from it. So much of the stuff that has been brought to the table to try and support these ancient astronaut theories have been debunked, just flat out refuted. So anyway, but this, some of the things that they will use to support their theory, and guys, anything but the Bible, right? And that's just the world. People want to believe anything but what the Bible says. And so they'll point at the universe and they'll say, it's so huge, it's so vast. You don't honestly think that with all that is out there, there's not another planet out there with life supporting conditions. Okay, surely we're not the only intelligent beings out there in this vast universe. Okay, that's one of their arguments. You guys have all heard it in various forms. It's kind of compelling until you start looking at all of the factors that have to be perfectly fine-tuned in the universe. All the factors, all the physical laws, the exact placement of a star near a certain size of a star placed at the exact distance from a certain size planet that has to have a moon, and it all has to be rotating exactly right. The thickness of the crust of the planet has to be right. The temperature of the planet has to be right. And I mean, just factor after factor after factor is what many Christians call this. I'll do a series on this someday. There's so many factors that have to be so perfectly fine-tuned in order for life to even survive. There's a movie out there called The Privileged Planet, and it's put together by a bunch of old Earth creationists. Nonetheless, it's a great watch. It's very informative, very entertaining, and it illustrates this whole anthropic principle very well. So anyway, when you hear people make the argument that the universe is so vast, you know, surely there's got to be intelligent life out there somewhere else, some other planet that can support life. No. I mean, scientifically speaking, no. Biblically speaking, absolutely no. So anyway, keep going here. All of the UFO sightings, and many of you who are listening to me right now have seen an unidentified flying object, something in the sky that you could not identify, something that was moving, whether irregularly or had some strange light to it or whatever, that you looked at and said, I don't know what that is. In my past, I can say that there was one time, oh boy, I'm even embarrassed to bring this up. There was one time where I saw something that I could not explain. It was triangular in shape. It had a big red glowing light on the bottom. It did have a triangular rim to it. So its edges were a triangle in shape, yet in the gaps around that big red light in the center, you could see through it. I don't know what it was. I have no idea. It was probably a helicopter. It didn't make any noise. I don't know what it was. It doesn't matter. All you guys have seen something, I'm sure. Many of you have. Many of you haven't. But people all around the world claim that they've seen something in the sky. Many of these claims are people believing they're seeing something but not knowing what it is, and it's something that is easily explained away by something that makes sense, and it's not some alien spaceship. Other situations, like all the videos and pictures that you guys see on the internet, a lot of that is faked. People like to produce content, to produce pictures, to produce videos that's fake. It's fun. It gets them attention. They like it. And so a lot of it is fake. Then you have stuff like what Fox News just put up on the news here in Colorado a few weeks back, I think it was a few weeks back, where they were showing some guy filming over Denver, and he goes out and he films every day at noon, and at noon, he can't see with his naked eye, but he sees these flying objects on his camera. And they go really fast. And they take corners in ways that our aircraft cannot corner. They just can't turn that way. They can't accelerate in that way. And so they had aviation experts come on to the news and say, nope, can't explain it. That's definitely unidentified. So we have stuff in our sky that sometimes we see, whether it's real or not, that we cannot identify. That is strange, though, that video I just mentioned, that nobody can see these with their naked eye here in Denver. And this is in broad daylight, mind you. It's all happening when the sun's up, and nobody sees it. But the guy that films it, it shows up on his camera. Fox News set up their own cameras, and sure enough, on their cameras, it shows up too. So they were able to reproduce it. Who knows? Who knows? But this is one of those things that the ancient astronaut adherents like to point to.